Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. He slid a photo across the table and missed my hand. I am Emma, 34, and I knew something was wrong. My husband never puts anything in front of me without a reason. He stood instead of sitting, fingers pressed flat on the table edge. By the time I picked up that picture, my stomach already hurt. The boy in the photo looked maybe 8, serious in a forced way. He wore a plain shirt, no logo, nothing that told me anything. His eyes seemed familiar enough that my brain started searching on its own. Friend's kid or coworker's nephew or some charity thing, every guess hit a wall. Across from me, he watched like a teacher waiting for an obvious answer. I laughed first because that is what my body does with shock. I asked whose kid it was and told him to stop being weird. He did not smile at all, just stared straight at my face. His throat moved once and he said it like a line he rehearsed. "That is my son." The words landed there heavy and flat, and I still did not get it. I thought he meant something symbolic, like a Godfather thing or a joke. You know that feeling when your mind just refuses to connect the pieces. I kept smiling, a stiff wrong smile that hurt my cheeks and eyes. He watched that fake smile die and did not rescue me from it. I asked what he meant, and he rested his hand on the photo. Not like my son in a sweet way, my real child. He tapped the corner with one finger and kept his hand there. The room did not move yet, but something inside my chest tilted hard. I remember thinking, there is no way this sentence belongs in my life. I asked where the mother was because my brain went straight there. He swallowed once and said her first name like I should already know it. Somewhere in the back of my head, a distant memory started banging. He said they had been involved years ago, and the boy came from that. Every word stacked on the table between us like a quiet accusation. My brain started doing math, even though I hate math under normal stress. I counted from when we got married to now and back to his timeline. The numbers refused to stay still, and they slid and overlapped and laughed. He watched me realize what the overlap meant, and he did not look away. The affair did not end before our vows, it lived right under them. You always think you would scream in a moment like that. I did not scream, I went quiet in a way that scared me. My hands started shaking around the edges, while my voice sounded almost normal. "So you cheated on me and had a kid and never told me." I heard my own question and hated how small it came out. He started talking fast then, like if he stopped I would run. He said the boy's mother is very sick and things are going bad. Doctors do not give her much time and there is no other family. I remember that part clearer than the cheating because it hit a different place. It moved the whole thing from betrayal drama into something that involved a child. He kept saying the boy's name and I forced myself to listen. He told me the kid knows his mom is getting worse and feels terrified. I pictured that serious face trying not to cry and my chest pulled tight. For a second I could almost step outside my pain and stand with him. Then the word affair echoed in my head again and dragged me back. "There is something else I need to tell you," he added. That sentence scared me more than the cheating because I could hear the trap. He said he already talked to someone from the state about temporary placement. He told them he has a stable home and a wife who loves children. I felt that last part hit me harder than any slap across the face. "You volunteered our house without asking me," I finally managed to say. He argued there was no time and that he planned to tell me tonight. He said they need an answer because the boy might lose his mother soon. He kept using that phrase, lose his mother, like it was softer than the truth. We both knew he meant die and neither of us wanted to touch it. Here is the ugly part I hate admitting when I look back now. My first clear thought was that saying no would make me a monster. Not just to him, to everyone who ever heard this story from his side. He built the whole thing so neatly that the villain role waited for me. If I refused, I was the cold wife. If I agreed, I was broken. Our 2 kids yelled from the living room about a show while we sat frozen. Real life kept rolling on around us and made everything feel even more unreal. I pictured that other child sitting somewhere in a hospital hallway waiting for news. The comparison dug into me because I knew which kid was about to lose everything. And I hated that my husband put me in charge of both their futures. What exactly are you asking me to do? I asked at last. He said he wants me to meet the boy and his mother tomorrow. Just see them and then decide, like that makes this any smaller. I stared at the photo again and realized I had not put it down. That small stupid. The detail is how I know I was already stepping over the line. The next morning I pulled the car into the hospital driveway and stopped. For a second I thought about throwing it in reverse and going home. He reached for the door handle and waited for me to move first. My fingers stayed locked around the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing. I heard myself say, "Let us get this over with," and hated how defeated I sounded. Inside the lobby he walked ahead like he had done this many times. I lagged behind and watched him nod at the volunteer at the desk. He knew where to turn without checking any signs, and that stung more than I expected. The elevator doors slid open and a stretcher came out fast enough to make me flinch. He stepped closer to me for half a second, then moved away again. We got off on the pediatric floor, and noise hit us immediately. A staff member pointed us toward a family room and opened the door. A kid sat on a chair by the window with both hands on his knees. He looked up when we entered, and his shoulders straightened like he braced for impact. My husband said his name gently, and the boy shot to his feet so fast it hurt to watch. He went toward the kid with open arms, and the child met him halfway. They hugged like this was something they had practiced more than once. I stood near the door and tried not to stare at the back of my husband's neck. The kid peeked over his shoulder at me with a wary little frown. "Is that her?" he asked in a low voice that still carried across the room. My husband pulled away and turned so the three of us formed an awkward triangle. "Yeah, this is Emma," he answered while smoothing the kid's hair with one hand. I stepped forward because staying by the door felt worse than moving closer. "Hey," I managed and pushed my hand out like this was a normal introduction. The kid's palm was small and dry, and he barely touched my fingers before pulling back. The kid stared at my face like he searched for something there and could not find it. "You look different than I imagined," he murmured while studying my shoes. I asked what he meant, and my voice came out softer than I expected. He shrugged and glanced at my husband instead, as if I were an extra piece of furniture. "You came back like you promised," and that one line cut through whatever numbness I had left. A nurse appeared in the doorway and asked if we were ready to see his mom. The kid grabbed my husband's wrist with both hands like he wanted to anchor him there. "You're coming too, right?" he asked without looking at me at all. My husband promised we all would go together, and I watched the kid release his grip slowly. I followed them down the corridor feeling like I had wandered into someone else's family drama and somehow become a lead character. We stepped into her room, and the air changed in a way I felt in my shoulders. She lay half-raised on the bed with an oxygen line under her nose and wires on her arms. Her eyes went straight to the kid, then moved to my husband and stayed there a beat too long. Then she looked at me and something like apology flickered across her face before she could hide it. "You must be Emma," she whispered, and my name sounded wrong coming from her mouth. The kid rushed to her side and climbed onto the narrow space beside her hip. He pressed his face against her arm and spoke too low for me to hear. She stroked his hair in slow, careful motions like each movement cost something she did not have. My husband moved to the other side of the bed and rested his hand on the metal rail. For a moment I really did feel like an intruder who walked into somebody else's goodbye. After a while she lifted her gaze to me again and nodded toward a chair. "Sit down, please." Her voice came out rough and I obeyed before I could think. "I wanted to talk to you before the social worker comes back." The word worker jolted me harder than anything else in that room so far. I realized this was not just a visit, this was an interview I never agreed to. "I know this is beyond unfair," she started and kept her eyes on the ceiling instead of me. "He told me you did not know about him until yesterday, and I almost told him not to bring you today. But I am running out of chances to fix anything for my child, and that scares me more than your anger. He has been visiting regularly these last months, and that has meant everything to our son. If he disappears when I am gone, I do not know what will be left of that boy. Heat rushed to my face because part of me wanted to scream that this disaster was not mine. Another part kept staring at the kid gripping her gown and knew that picture would haunt me if I left him here. You are asking me to raise the living proof of what he did. When I heard myself say that out loud, my voice shook hard enough to make the kid look up. She shut her eyes for a beat, then opened them with a strange, clear determination that made me feel even smaller. I am asking you to let my son vanish into a system that will never see him as a person. The way she hit the word person felt sharper than a slap, and I could not tell if I deserved it. There was a quick knock on the frame, and a woman stepped in holding a thin folder. Her badge swung from a lanyard, and my stomach tightened when I realized this was the person he had already spoken to. She greeted the room in a practiced warm tone, then opened the folder and glanced at the top page. So this is your wife then, and I felt all the air leave my lungs. You told me she was fully on board with taking guardianship when we talked last week. My head snapped toward him so fast my neck twinged, and he would not meet my eyes. There it was, proof that the story about no time had been edited for my benefit. He cleared his throat and mumbled something about discussions at home and needing to go over details. The worker flipped another page, and I saw both our names already typed in a line marked prospective caregivers. Right then, I knew this was bigger than the betrayal and that the forms already counted me as locked into this. The meeting ended before my thoughts could land, and the worker was already shaking my hand about future checks. I nodded at whatever she outlined and watched the kid trace circles on the rail like his future balanced on our choice. When we stepped back into the hallway, he slipped his hand into my husband's without even looking, like that path was familiar. For half a second, his other hand brushed against mine, and I felt him hesitate there between us. Walking toward the elevator, I understood that whatever I chose later, I had already let him into my story by being there. The doorbell would not stop ringing, and our kids were yelling. I wiped my hands on a towel and just stared at the door. He called from the hallway that they were here and sounded almost breathless. When I finally turned the knob, my fingers felt strangely slow and clumsy. The boy in the case beside him were the first things I saw. The worker stood behind him with a forced, pleasant expression that twitched. My husband hovered slightly to the side like he wanted to look harmless. The boy kept one hand on the handle of his case like it anchored him. Hi again, he muttered and glanced past me into the house. It hit me that this was not a visit, this was arrival. The worker asked if she could step inside so we could talk. I moved back out of pure habit and almost bumped into the wall. She handed me a clipboard and started running through bullet points in a practiced rhythm. Short-term placement, background checks, follow-up visits, all the phrases rolled over my head. My signature was already printed under his on half the pages. I looked at him and he would not quite meet my eyes. We can adjust details later, he murmured while rubbing his forehead. Right now we just need him settled, that was the line he chose. I could feel the worker watching my reaction like this was part of the evaluation. I signed anyway because refusing in front of them felt like staging a public execution. Our kids thundered in from the living room and skidded to a stop. Both stared at the boy like he had dropped from a different planet. Is this the cousin? Our oldest asked with a quick flick toward me. I heard the lie forming in my throat and it scared me. No, I answered, this is your brother. The word brother hung there like smoke nobody wanted to wave away. The younger one grinned and grabbed the boy's sleeve without any hesitation. Cool, does that mean bunk beds? He asked while already dragging him inside. The older one folded his arms and moved closer to me instead. I felt his shoulder press against my side like a quiet accusation. The worker praised how welcoming everyone looked and wrote something on her form. She asked to see where he would sleep and started down the hallway. My husband hurried ahead and opened the door to our former guest room. Fresh sheets, a small stack of folded clothes, his case parked by the bed. He had prepared all this while I was still deciding if I could breathe. The worker checked the window, the smoke detector, the bathroom down the hall. She asked about school enrollment and medical coverage and daily schedule. Each time she asked a practical question, he supplied a polished answer immediately. I stood there nodding, adding a word here and there so I did not look decorative. Every answer just reminded me how long he had been planning without me. When she finally left the driveway, the house went strangely quiet. The kids had dragged the boy to their room to show off something noisy. My husband exhaled hard and leaned against the counter like he had run a marathon. I asked him how many of those answers were rehearsed with her already. He stared at the floor and told me we could not fight in front of them. Too late for that, I snapped and surprised myself with how sharp it sounded. You volunteered our home, our money, our sanity, and you forgot my vote. He lifted his hands like I was attacking him with something physical. I did not forget. I trusted you would not let a child disappear. The worst part was a small piece of me knew he was right. The boy appeared in the doorway, clutching a toy our younger one pushed at him. We are hungry, he announced, like he was testing how orders worked here. Our kids stared at me waiting because I am the one who usually decides. I told them to set the table, my voice steadier than I felt. That simple sentence made me realize I was already hosting him. Dinner felt like a strange performance with an audience of one new critic. The boy watched every tiny interaction between us like he studied a language. My husband kept cracking small jokes that landed in odd places and died. Our kids competed to tell stories and kept dragging the boy into them. He gave short answers, eyes darting between us like he expected someone to vanish. At one point, our oldest asked why their new brother had never visited before. The table went silent so fast that even the clock seemed too loud. My husband reached for his glass, hand trembling just enough for me to notice. Grown-up mistake, long story, fixing it now, he tossed out those pieces. Our oldest looked at me instead and waited for something more honest. I shrugged and admitted that parents mess things up worse than kids sometimes. We are trying to do better now, that was all I could manage. The boy looked at me with an expression I still cannot fully name. Hope, suspicion, something in between, whatever it was lodged in my chest. That was the first moment I felt responsible for more than his bed. After dinner, our younger one asked if the boy could sleep in his room. The idea clearly thrilled him, but the new kid froze in place. I watched his eyes flick toward the hallway where his assigned room waited. He finally shook his head and muttered that he already unpacked in there. He knew not to act too eager, and that broke something smaller but real. Bath time turned into chaos, and in that chaos I saw new cracks. The boy kept asking what products belonged to who and where his things fit. Our kids argued about whose towel he could borrow and who had dibs. I heard my own voice snap rules faster than my brain processed them. By the end, everyone looked tired and slightly wary of one another. When the house finally quieted, I passed his doorway and paused. He lay facing the wall, blanket pulled high, shoulders tight under the fabric. I almost kept walking because stepping inside felt like crossing another line. Instead, I knocked softly and asked if he needed anything for the night. He turned his head just enough to check if I meant it. Can I keep my shoes right here? He asked, pointing near the bed. The question sounded ridiculous and heavy at the same time. I told him yes and asked if he needed the light left on. He shook his head and whispered that hospitals were brighter than he liked. That small comment reminded me this bedroom was a promotion and a downgrade at once. Down in the kitchen, he waited for me with 2 mugs on the counter. We stood across from each other in a silence that buzzed. He reached for my hand and I let him take it for once. I do not know how to make this less awful for you. I do not know either, I answered, but I know this is only the beginning. His phone vibrated across the nightstand and jolted me awake. He kept breathing slow and even back-turned, arm heavy over the blanket. The screen flashed again, notification bar stacking with little rectangles of noise. I waited for him to reach toward it to even twitch. Nothing. That stillness did more damage than the sound itself. The third buzz came with a preview I could read from my pillow. You cannot delay forever, he goes back to the hospital tomorrow. The contact name on top was a last name I recognized from intake forms. My chest tightened because it meant this was about the kid, not spam. He kept that same fake sleep breathing, and I felt my patience crack. I know exactly where I crossed a line that night. I reached over him, grabbed the phone, and held it above his face. The screen unlocked on his features for a second, then popped open to the thread. Rows of messages crowded the screen, all time-stamped, all recent. My thumb hovered and then moved on its own toward the top. The newest text sat under a long chain from his son's aunt. "You promised you would file months ago, now look where we are." Another one right above it burned even hotter. "If you had stepped up earlier, he would not be facing strangers alone." Strangers, that was me, that was the word they used for us. He had told me everything escalated quickly, no chance to prepare. According to this chat, they had argued about paperwork since last year. She reminded him of meetings with lawyers he had skipped, appointments he had canceled. There were screenshots of emails from him where he swore he was handling it. Reading them felt like opening a second life where I did not exist. I scrolled higher and hit the first message with my name in it. "You still living with her like everything is normal," the aunt wrote. He responded that things were complicated, but he could not leave suddenly. Next bubble from her accused him of wanting both setups at once. That line made my hand shake so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I told myself to stop there, to put it down and breathe. Instead, I backed out of the thread and opened his conversation with the boy's mother. Her contact photo was the same face from the hospital, just healthier. The last thing she wrote before the hospital admission hurt more than the rest. "If something happens to me, you better not let her pretend he is not yours." Further up I found earlier weeks, earlier months, just endless scattered days. She sent pictures of school projects, football practice, silly faces in rides. He answered with little jokes, plans, promises, dates they would visit next. He reminded her of some trip they took when he was traveling for work. That trip overlapped perfectly with the weekend he told me his flight was canceled. I kept going until the blue and gray bubbles blurred together. Then one message stood out like it had been waiting for me. "Thanks for giving me one more weekend, I really needed that with you." My finger tapped the date automatically, my brain doing math again. I was pregnant that weekend, I remember, because my back hurt nonstop. Not gonna lie, I almost threw the phone into the wall. Seeing him texting sweet lines to her while I lay nauseous at home. It felt less like betrayal and more like deliberate staging of a show. He had always painted himself as dragged into this, reluctant and cornered. On that screen, he looked like a man juggling two lives he enjoyed. Behind me, the mattress shifted and his arm lifted slightly. "How long have you been going through my phone?" His voice came out rough. I did not answer that, I just turned and held the screen toward him. "Which part do you want me to stop at, the lies or the schedule?" His eyes focused on that one flagged date, and I saw panic flash. He pushed himself upright and reached out like he could erase everything. I pulled the device back out of reach and climbed off the bed. "You told me you barely knew him until recently," I reminded him. "You told me this all exploded fast and you were scrambling to catch up. The texts show you dragging your feet for months while planning visits." He swung his legs over the side and buried his face in his hands. I heard a muffled "I was scared" slip through his fingers. Scared of losing us, scared of losing him, scared of lawyers. That word "scared" did nothing for me in that moment. Coward fit better, even if I did not say it yet. I tapped to another screenshot the aunt had sent him in frustration. "You said you would push for custody while she was still strong enough. Why would they need him to push earlier if this was all sudden?" I asked that out loud and watched his shoulders stiffen. He finally looked up and I could see he knew cornered when he felt it. He insisted they had misunderstood, that talks were informal, just ideas. I scrolled to an older section where he wrote about getting full custody eventually. His exact words glared from the screen now that I knew the context. "Once things settle at home, I can bring him over for good." You tell me what that sounds like, because it does not scream reluctant hero. The worst discovery was not the romance, it was the strategy. There were notes about timing, about waiting until our kids were older. He talked about me like some schedule problem, not a person. She worried about dying, and he worried about how messy divorce would look. Reading my life broken into logistics made my stomach twist in a new way. Then I hit messages from days I remembered clearly for different reasons. Birthday parties, school events, moments I thought were simple family days. While I hosted relatives, he texted that he hated being stuck there. He called our house chaotic and complained that I would never understand his stress. Seeing my own life described like a burden by my own spouse stunned me. At one point, I accidentally opened our own thread with each other. I saw my cheerful check-ins stacked next to his short, generic replies. On another screen, he was planning secret visits while telling me he was swamped. That parallel hurt in a way I still cannot fully explain even now. It proved I had been talking to a mask for longer than I guessed. He reached for my wrist gently and missed when I stepped back. "You were never supposed to see it like that," he tried. I laughed once too sharp because there is no good angle here. "You curated a version of yourself for every audience," I told him. "Then you picked the one that made you look safest and fed it to me." He got off the bed. Elian moved closer, bare feet on the floor. I could tell he wanted to hug me to reset, to soothe. Instead, I shoved the phone into his chest hard enough to make him grunt. "You did not just cheat on me, you recruited me into your cleanup." His face dropped at that because he finally heard what I had been feeling. A soft knock hit the door and we both froze mid-argument. The kid's voice slipped through the gap asking if everything was okay. My husband stepped toward the door automatically, but I lifted my hand to stop him. "If he sees us like this tonight, he will think he caused it." I could not add that I already felt guilty enough for existing in his mess. He waited by the door and forced his tone steady. "Go back to bed, we are just talking, nothing to do with you." I listened to small footsteps retreat down the hallway and felt my throat burn. My rage had to be folded and shoved into some hidden drawer for now. That did not make it smaller, it just made it more concentrated. When we were alone again, he leaned his head against the door. "Tell me what you want me to do," his voice finally cracked. The honest answer in my chest was leave right now, end this. But the image of that boy's face in the hospital room would not leave. I knew whatever choice I made was going to hurt someone innocent most. I walked past him into the hallway without another word. On the way to the bathroom, I passed the kid's open doorway. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hands folded on his chest. He did not call out, he just tracked me with those same wary eyes. In that silence, I realized my husband was not the only one I needed to judge now. I dragged my suitcase to the front door and he stepped in front. The wheels bumped his heel and he did not move an inch. "You are not doing this," his voice came out raw and shaky. Behind him, I could see the hallway light and nothing else. It felt like the whole house was holding its breath with us. "Move," I told him, fingers tight on the handle. He shook his head once and planted his hand on the wall. "You want space? Fine, take the car and cool off somewhere." He tried a crooked half smile like this was a dramatic tantrum. "I am not going for a drive, I am leaving you." The word leaving hung between us and he finally blinked. "We can still fix this, we just need time and therapy." He threw every desperate phrase at me like handfuls of sand. I let him talk until the words started circling the same drain. Then I told him about my appointment that afternoon with an attorney. That got his attention faster than any insult I threw all week. "You talked to a lawyer," he repeated, like the concept broke his brain. "Yeah, I sat in an office and explained your secret second life." I told her about the forms with my name already printed on them. She looked at me like someone who walked in after their house already burned. I remembered the attorney leaning forward with her hands linked. "You are not obligated to stay married because he fathered another child. You are not legally required to parent that child either." The way she emphasized that last part made me swallow hard. Because I already knew I had slid past that line weeks ago. Back at the door, he ran a hand through his hair. "So that is it, paperwork and done, we are strangers." I almost laughed because strangers usually get full disclosure first. "No," I said, "there is more, and you are not going to like it." Our oldest stepped out of the hallway just enough to listen. He tried to act casual, shoulder on the wall, eyes on his phone. I saw his thumb resting on a dark screen that never moved. The younger one peeked from the stairs, wide-eyed and silent. This was the audience for our grand finale, whether we wanted it or not. I told him I also called the social worker that morning. His jaw clenched because he knew exactly which one I meant. I asked her what happens if I move out and you keep him. She explained that custody stays with you unless you abandon your placement. Abandon, that word lodged in my chest like a nasty little hook. On the phone, the worker paused for a long 3 seconds. Do you want him there, she asked, or do you feel forced? I told her the truth that still scares me when I hear it. I do not trust his father right now, but I care about the kid. She exhaled slowly and said those two facts could matter in court. Back in the doorway, I watched him put it together. You are trying to take him from me, his voice cracked up. I shook my head because it was not that simple. I told her I might stay with the kids and with him. You would move out for a while, maybe longer, maybe forever. Our oldest finally lowered the useless phone and stared straight at us. So he stays and you do not, he asked, eyes shining. That question hurt more than any accusation he could have thrown. I nodded once because lying in that moment felt worse than leaving. The younger one started crying quietly into the banister, It was shaking hard. My husband stepped toward them and then toward me and stopped halfway. You want our kids to grow up with him but not me. He sounded almost stunned, like I had invented a new form of betrayal. I pointed at the hallway where the affair child slept in that borrowed room. He did not blow up our home, you did that all by yourself. He started pacing the entryway, bare feet loud on the floor. So what happens? I get a motel and weekend visits like some cliché. His laugh came out harsh and too close to a sob. You cannot just cut me out and keep all the good parts. I reminded him calmly that courts do not care about his hurt ego. I had asked the attorney about that too, because of course I did. She explained custody schedules in a clear, even tone like this was routine. You can negotiate shared time with your children even if you move out. As for the other child, the court looks at history and consistency. You cannot yank him back to his mother and pretend none of this happened. The part that really messed with me came next. The attorney asked if I felt any bond with the boy. I froze because the automatic answer I wanted no longer fit. I pictured him lining up shoes by his bed and whispering about hospital lights. So I told her yes a little, and that admission scared me. Now in the entryway, I watched my husband process that possibility. You told them you care about him, he asked, almost offended. He is a child living under my roof, sharing meals with my kids. What did you think would happen, that I would ignore him like a chair? His flinch told me that image hit closer than he expected. A small figure appeared at the end of the hallway, barefoot and wary. The boy rubbed his eyes and stared at the suitcase by my leg. Are you leaving because of me? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Both our kids turned to look at me at the same time. 3 sets of eyes waiting for the answer that could break everything. I crouched so we were on the same level and held his gaze. No, I told him, I am leaving because grown-ups made huge mistakes. You are not a mistake, and you are not a punishment either. His chin trembled and he glanced at my husband like he needed confirmation. For once my husband stayed quiet and let my words stand. I added something I never thought I would hear myself say. You are staying here tonight with them, you are family to them now. My husband jerked like I had slapped him across the face. So I am the one who goes to a motel, he blurted out. Yes, I answered, you are the one who created this storm. The younger one ran across the space and wrapped himself around my waist. Please do not go, he pleaded into my shirt, words muffled. Our oldest stayed back but his jaw clenched hard. If you leave him here, you better not change your mind later. He was talking about the boy, not his father, and everyone knew it. I told them I had a place lined up for a few weeks. I would see them on set days, phone calls every single night. Nothing about their access to me was disappearing even if my keys did. But I needed distance from the man who lied in every direction. I was not willing to make them pack bags because of his choices. My husband reached for the suitcase and tried one final angle. We can reset without attorneys, we can send him back to placement. The boy flinched so hard his shoulders nearly touched his ears. I stepped between them before I could overthink it. Nobody is shipping that child anywhere like a package again. For a moment everything went still, even the clock seemed to hush. My husband looked at me like he was seeing a stranger in my skin. I guess you picked your side, he muttered, grabbing his wallet from the shelf. He yanked open the door, then hesitated with his hand on the frame. He walked out without kissing any of the kids goodbye that night. Later I sat on the couch with all 3 of them around me. The younger one fell asleep against my arm, the boy near my knees. Our oldest stared at the blank television screen like it owed him answers. You are really coming back tomorrow? He asked, not looking up. I promised I would and prayed I was not lying this time. Now I am writing this from a small rented room with thin walls. The kids are with him overnight, including the boy, because schedules started fast. My phone keeps lighting up with messages, apologies, bargains, threats, everything. The attorney wants a decision about legal steps, the worker wants clarity about placement. So I am asking you, internet strangers, would you still fight to keep that boy in your life while tearing the marriage apart? Or would you walk away from all of it and finally breathe?